Thank you so much. My name is Josh Rogin. I'm with the Washington Post. I'm so happy to be here at the Trusted Tech Summit. And thank you for giving us the enviable position of being between the audience and the open bar. We're here today to discuss what it means to move fast with allies and trusted partners. And we have what I can only consider to be a top flight panel for discussing that. Let me briefly introduce our panelists, and then we'll get right to the questions. To my immediate left, we have Brendan Dowling, Deputy Secretary for Critical Infrastructure and Protective Security at the Australian Department of Home Affairs. He helped architect Australia's protective security policy framework and played a central role in Australia's counter foreign intelligence reforms. And he oversees the integration of cyber, physical security, and national resilience functions. Is that, I got all that right? Okay, that came from ChatGPT, so correct me if I'm wrong. To his left, we have Mikko Karikyto, the Chief Product Security Officer from Ericsson, who's actually Finnish. And ChatGPT told me that you used to work for Nokia. Is that right? No, see? So the models don't actually, they hallucinate. Good to know. Good to know. 1 point for Anthropic if you're still in the room. Former director of Italy's National Cybersecurity Agency, which he helped build, and a key architect of Italy's positions. I'm sorry, I got that wrong. This is ChatGPT. Mikko oversees global product security across Ericsson's entire telecom portfolio, including 5G and 6G R&D, and leads one of the most rigorous telecom security assurance programs. To his left, we have Alex Wong, who many of you will know as the former Principal Deputy National Security Advisor and former State Department official, who is now the Chief Global Strategy Officer for the Hanwha Group. And he leads global strategy for Hanwha, one of the world's fastest growing and advanced manufacturing conglomerates. And then last, but certainly not least, we have Roberto Baldoni, Senior Advisor in Technology and Cybersecurity to the Ambassador of Italy to the United States. And he's actually the former Director General of Italy's National Cybersecurity Agency, which he helped build from the ground up. Let me start with you, Alex. And Hanwha, one of the most active infrastructure and technology companies, expanding its reach, especially here in the United States, especially in partnership with this administration, is known for scaling defense manufacturing. We were talking backstage about the challenges of merging that with the speed of software advancement. So we have some companies, some partners that can do scaling of defense manufacturing, and others that can do advanced software, and they move at different paces often, and they often move in different circles. How does Hanwha approach that problem? And how do you, having first worked inside the U.S. government and now working for this international conglomerate, think about the interaction of hardware and manufacturing and software, especially when it comes to trusted tech? Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Josh. Well, look, I think the key here is that among the free world allies, whether that's Korea, whether that's our European partners, whether that's the United States, the chief goal here is that we move faster in integrating next generation technologies, whether that's AI and autonomy or quantum, into defense systems, and doing it faster than the closed or revisionist world. That's the competition we're in. So if we want to move fast, the benefit and the advantage we have as allies is that we can work together to fill gaps and complement each other. And I think the key here, and that what I recognized in my government role, and what I continue to recognize, and what I think my company, Hanwha, recognizes, is if we're just talking about AI and autonomy, the U.S. is in the lead. The U.S. has the best models in the world. It has certain technologies on GPU design, and they have the most innovative environment where we have multiple companies pushing the edges of innovation, seeing opportunity, particularly in the defense space. However, where the U.S. is behind, where the U.S. needs to fill a gap, is on industrial scale and the ability to integrate these new technologies, this new software into systems, into defense platforms. And speaking just for my company and speaking for Korea, which I think is a model ally in this respect, That's where Korea and Korean companies and Hanwha can fill that gap. We can find partners in the U.S. Either at a G to G level, government to government level, or with private sector actors to marry that innovation in the software side to industrial scale, to system integration. Where as allies, we can field these faster than our competitors. And just to highlight an example, Hanwha recently announced a partnership with Havoc AI, which is a Rhode Island-based software firm that has a great autonomy stack in the maritime surface vehicle space. So and it's founded by a former naval surface officer, a former flight officer from the Navy, who have engineering degrees, was founded only 2 years ago. So taking that fast, quick-moving startup, marrying it with our industrial scale, I think we're going to have some real ability to put steel in the water, steel in the air, do it in at the scale that we need to create these attritable systems to have that advantage over the revisionist world.
Excellent. Havoc AI, for those of you who don't know, is also founded by a man who was a refugee from the United States, from Burma.
Right, Myanmar, yeah.
From Myanmar. He'll always be Burma to me, but it's neither here nor there. Great company. Before we move on, let me ask you to take us one level deeper. We know that the opportunity to merge hardware and software innovation is there. What are the challenges, and where are the gaps in our ability to do that? And where can some of the people in this room who might have pitches for how to merge those gaps think about plugging in?
Look, I think a quick general answer here, and this applies not just to defense technology, but to broad AI technology in the civilian space as well. Allies and countries, I think, justifiably will want sovereign AI capability, data security protection, but also that the models and the technology, that there is some ownership in a broad sense of how this new technology applies in their societies. This is something that Korea talks about, and we respect a general policy of sovereign AI, but you lose the advantages, not just of speed, but of capability if you are locking your AI behind geographic borders. In the same way that traditional conventional defense systems need to be interoperable, so does AI technology to achieve, whether it's access to data or sharing of this ability across borders. That's how we get that advantage. So that's a puzzle. That's a policy puzzle. One that I think the allies in discussion will have to figure out.
Very interesting. That's a perfect segue for me to go to you, Roberto. We're talking about AI sovereignty, the balance between regulation and innovation. Of course, Europe has a different calculation on that balance than maybe the United States. But talk about that. Tell us about how you think about digital sovereignty within the context of, first of all, Italy being a part of the EU, and then also Italy being part of NATO. And how does that all work in the best case scenario, and how does that work in real life?
This balance is sometimes very difficult to achieve because you have to compromise a lot of things between our member states, with NATO, and with the United States. So actually, I believe that it's very important right now, when I talk with people at the government, to realize that not everyone understood what's happening in the context, for example, of strategic autonomy. When you talk about strategic autonomy of a country, many believes that is the strategic autonomy of 50 years ago. Okay, so national borders, army, physical assets and everything. I mean, after the globalization and the digital transformation, also the notion of strategic autonomy changed. And this has to be realized. Otherwise, if you think with the mindsetting of 50 years ago, we will be always stuck between different democracy in a sort of deadlock where nobody is able to exit from this. Why? Because right now you have that supply chain are everywhere in any country, and we are all connected by dependencies, and of course this dependency has to become our strength. I mean, the strength of democracies. We don't have the scale, let's say, to face directly China. I think any of us thinks about talents, about the workforce, about the possibility to impact on the market for a reason of scale. So that's why we are destined to stand together. And this is something that is not easy to realize. So the strategic autonomy is now inside this web of dependencies and be able to be part of as many as possible of critical supply chain, and inside this web you take your strategic autonomy. If you don't understand this, it will be very difficult for that country, and then you have problem, you have issue, because we see what's happened between the US and Europe sometimes. We like to regulate, but sometimes we regulate on things that we even don't know at the scientific level, which is the AI. And then recently there was a survey saying that, if you are able to comply with all GDPR, you cannot comply with the AI Act. So we are in a kind of stack. So it's fair, but this is not for free. This means that all the system of the democracies slow down in the technological race. So that's why it's very important to share a vision, to share concept, like a new concept of strategic autonomy, build on top of this a way in which we can create this trusted supply chain and work in order that, any country will have its own freedom of autonomy inside and be able to advance all together. Because again, it's a matter of scale. We need to stay together in order to avoid what I heard from the previous panel. So that China takes the lead, and then we can forget about freedom inside technology and putting our values. I mean, this was for free because the first wave of technology arrived when we were very young. So actually in the 80s, in the 90s, it was developed mainly in the US. So they were inside this value embedded by design, which is not anymore the case. So we have to fight, we have to stand each other in order to make this happen and continue to happen. And we need to work a lot of awareness. Last week we were in Rome with colleagues of the Kroc Institute for a workshop with the highest authority in Italy, because this is not an easy topic for a politician, and it's very important that you go there, you bring the argument, and of course they are scared by these kind of things, but we have to. There is no question, and I am very happy about what is happening in Europe right now, in Brussels, which is, at least, from what we heard from the news, is that there is this digital omnibus act, which actually, step back a little bit the regulation on digital stuff. From GDPR to AI Act. Someone say that the AI Act can be postponed of a couple of years, because first of all, it targets the European companies first. And I think that, the colleague from Ericsson can definitely, confirm that. But
let's ask him, guys. So you're nodding, shrugging, raising your eyebrows. You have some thoughts on all of this. Do you think that strategic autonomy and interdependence among allies are possible in the same system? And do you think that Europe is correctly calculating its balance between safety, regulation, and innovation support?
Well, so firstly, I am a security practitioner. So I started as an incident investigator. So I've been going around the planet and actually investigated hands-on on breaches in telecommunication networks and root causes, and then designed defenses for those. So I've seen a lot of bad stuff, and my team continues every day. Today included, sees bad stuff happening in the networks globally. So I'm a little bit cynical about the fact that actually the regulation, like you say, a little bit from your point of view, also it can hinder us to develop defenses because, like, let's be frank, the enemy doesn't give a crap about our regulation. They will keep hacking to our networks. They will be exploiting and abusing the technology, innovating. They're deploying already AI agents, hacking to the networks and hacking to the companies and government institutions. So they are innovating all the time. So we need to be as fast as possible, and that is only really possible if I take just a brief moment of discussing about the trust stack that we talk about in Ericsson, and that really starts, it applies to telecommunication, but there's a fifth layer of trust stack I'm going to explain very briefly. So it starts with the standardization, the product development. I'm in charge of the product development security, for Ericsson, and then comes the deployment and operations. So this is the whole stack, how we operate 5G networks, for example, how they're built and then operated. But outside this technology stack and the trust stack, actually, I imagine that there's a fifth layer, and that's the government, that's the nation providing the companies, be they communication service providers and vendors, a healthy environment where they are also, to a certain extent, defended from malicious actors. And something that really resonates with me when I'm having a meeting earlier today in White House is the U.S. is really taking a stance that there need to be consequences on the attackers. We, the defenders, we are paying tall bills already as of today for defending everybody using the technology, and we need to pay more. We need to ramp up our defenses, but something needs to happen with the offense also. That's the hockey stick in telecommunication, is really the attacks on the telecommunication networks. So we need to really make sure, because these telecommunication networks, they are the basis for everything else. Data centers, clouds, and AI are very uninteresting if you can't connect to them, and all of us connect to them with our phones and our devices of all kinds. So I really think that a moderate, a pragmatic approach in, if not regulating, but steering the world to a right direction in security is needed.
Understood. And I do want to talk about the telecom networks in the next round. But since you brought it up, AI-driven cyber attacks, algorithmic-driven cyber attacks. Sorry, Anthropic, don't pull your funding. But that just happened. What should we think of that? How prepared are we for that? Do we have any defenses to that? What do we need to do to live in this new reality where foreign state actors use American AI technology to hack Americans? Or Europeans, for that matter, or Australians, excuse me.
Yeah, I think it holds true. If we look at just history of cybersecurity, always the attacker has usually the first mover advantage. They need to just find one hole and abuse or exploit that to get into a system, for example. So of course they're going to use any technology available, any means and techniques available for them. What we need to do is really understanding AI also holistically. In Ericsson, what we're doing is we're using AI for development. So actually efficiency in the development, we're integrating AI. Actually from 2010, we've been working with AI into the combining it with the hardware, so software, hardware, AI together to actually make the networks better, but also make them more secure. And then AI for the security detections, for example. So we need to understand the AI from multiple angles, and I mean, sharing intelligence and being collaborative across not only the companies but public and private is needed. And maybe there is one of the questions I often hear is that, well, what can we do, this public-private partnerships, and how can we be better? Well, I think that at some point also, as a community, we need to look into like how punitive we are for those companies or those leaders who fail to defend their company against an Chinese nation state, CCP, for example, putting CISOs to prison. Instead, we should maybe find incentives for companies, organizations to creating defenses and sharing intelligence across the organizational borders, as an example.
Good idea. Brendan, you've sat here very patiently. Thank you for that. I'm open to hearing your reaction to anything that's been said, but I would love to hear your explanation of how Australia approaches this very problem of critical infrastructure, more vulnerable than ever, changing faster than ever. your government has had a unique approach to this. Explain to us the benefits of that approach and anything else that you'd like to say to react to what we've already heard.
Sure. Look, I think for several years now, we've taken seriously the threat to our critical infrastructure, and everything's getting worse. We live in a very contested region in the Asia Pacific, and cyber technology is the center for that contest. So I spend a lot of my time talking to boards and CEOs of water companies, of power facilities, of telcos, talking about the nature of the threat, why they need to be prepared. The AI enabled, supported cyber attacks are something we do need to be attentive to. But in some ways, I'd be glad if malicious actors were forced to use AI tools, because right now they're still getting away with the basics. They're still getting away with exploiting failures of cyber hygiene, failure to patch, people falling for spear phishing emails and clicking on the bad link. So we need to have a mind to the future sophisticated AI-generated malware, but for the time being, most threat actors are getting away with the same tools that they used 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So we shouldn't forget the basic cyber hygiene practices. What I would say is we have really tried to advance the thinking that our infrastructure operators do about the technology that they use. And technology, whether it's built by what we call high-risk vendors, in Australia we're talking about Chinese vendors, or by what we might call trusted vendors, both can be vectors for attack. So firstly, we need to be thoughtful about the tech that we're deploying in our infrastructure systems, but we shouldn't just assume that just because something is developed by an American company or an Australian company that is automatically safer. We need to raise the expectations on those vendors as well, because they can be exploited by the same malicious actors. That said, we've boxed ourselves into a corner with a lot of tech where the only source, the only vendors are coming from high-risk jurisdictions like China. So the important through line for the conversation we're having today is that actually, as partners, as allies, we need to fill those gaps. We need to produce, manufacture the technology that we can then rely upon to better protect our systems. Because, we were the first country to ban 5G, high-risk vendors from our 5G network a few years ago. But what if Ericsson and Nokia weren't in the game anymore? Then we would have been trapped using high-risk vendors. And I think that's a situation we're going to find ourselves in with a range of different technologies.
Interesting. Thank you. Little troubling, but informative. I'm sure you get that a lot. I'm wondering if I could ask you to continue on and address the point that Alex and Roberto were making about the tension between strategic autonomy and collaboration. If we're all going to have sovereign AI strategies, if we're all going to protect our AI innovation from each other, then how can we collaborate to outscale or even just out-innovate the high-risk actors? And how does the Australian government think about that?
We think about it in terms of partnerships. Strategic autonomy, Australia alone is just not a available approach to us. We're not necessarily a small market, but we're vastly smaller than the US and China. We're geographically situated in a region where we're surrounded by less traditional partners when it comes to security settings. We cannot go it alone. We are deeply reliant on American technology producers, on American hyperscalers. We're deeply reliant on the subsea cables that NEC out of Japan lays. We need partnerships if we are to together maintain that technology primacy. So Australia, unfortunately, is not a technology superpower. The only way we come at these issues is in alliance, through the Quad, in a bilateral partnership with the US, in partnership with European companies. We need to divide and conquer so that we can maintain primacy across the tech stack. We don't need to all be experts or dominant in each layer of the stack. That's where working together, we can not only make sure Australia has access to trusted technologies, but it matters to us what technologies our neighbors use. It matters to us what Indonesia uses, what Malaysia uses, because that's the near region that we're in. So we also need to make available that trusted technology to our partners in the region so that we're all operating in a trusted technology stack.
Excellent. Thank you. Since we're almost there, let's go all the way and just talk more about the threats. We've got a lot of experts here who know a lot about the threats. And specifically, what are the next level of threats? We can see the AI threats emerging, but you guys are in a position to tell us what's lurking around the corner. And I want to stay with you, Brendan, for the beginning of this, because in many ways, but including geographically, Australia is on the front lines of these threats. And I've noticed over the years, sometimes the threats reach you before they reach us. So if you're looking, a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years out, what are we not thinking about yet? What do we need to start thinking about in terms of the threats, especially the cyber threats that we haven't been discussing enough, that you see in your secret meetings? Thank you.
Look, I think everything gets worse from here. All the threats that we are aware of, that we're conscious of, get worse. Whether it's cyber criminals, whether it's nation-state actors, I don't think anyone in this room would say that we have effectively deterred nation-state actors from using cyber as a means of state power. There'll be greater scale, greater sophistication, greater willingness, and little in the way of guardrails to stop the use of the cyber vector as a tool of statecraft, as a tool of warcraft. That doesn't mean we shouldn't continue our efforts to deter, to set red line boundaries around the use of cyber tools. But I think when we look at the last few years, actually, we've lost ground when it comes to that. So I don't expect necessarily anything new, but we will continue to see an evolution and a willingness to use it. I think the thing that should trouble us all is that civilian services and civilian infrastructure are now on the battlefield, are now being targeted by nation-state actors, whether it's Russia, Ukraine, whether it's Volt Typhoon and Salt Typhoon operating out of China. We have now established a precedent where civilian services can be targeted, sabotaged, disrupted. And if we continue to see that trend, that represents, I think, a real strategic problem for all of our nations.
Seems that it does. Mikko, let me ask you, since Brendan brought up Salt Typhoon and Volt Typhoon, I'm sure most people in this room already know, but Salt Typhoon was the name given by the U.S. intelligence community to a group of operators or operations, let's say, of what we're believed to be Chinese intelligence state-sponsored hackers who penetrated all of our telecom networks for at least a year and a half, if not longer, and are still in there as far as we know, and compromised the sensitive classified FBI systems, et cetera, et cetera. It's pretty bad. Probably the worst telecom hack in history. And again, ongoing. And what are we doing about that, Mikko? How's that going? How has that affected your company? Are all our telecom systems still compromised to this day, or at least we can't say that they're not? And if the Salt Typhoon hackers can be in our telecom infrastructure, well, that seems like a pretty big problem that we should probably talk more about.
Without directly making promises about the number of threat actors in the networks, I think that it's fair to say the telecommunication networks, mobile networks, have probably become the most valuable target for threat actors in nation states. It's so much metadata and information about us and our, where we go, what do we do, and with whom, and it's getting more and more critical. I would say that what we're gonna see is firstly that the attacks are gonna scale badly. Which is waiting to see first really scalable or scaled attacks where AI agents are used to actually massively, fingerprint your systems and then getting in on the fly research for vulnerabilities, 0-day vulnerabilities that are not known by anyone else, getting in and then fingerprinting your systems, etc. So I think that is to happen. Then what I really like what you said, actually, because the many of the so-called what we call sometimes APTs are not advanced; they're very average actually. So it's unfortunate that oftentimes the average persistent threats get in because human mistakes. So what I see is where we have the best bets are put into automation and orchestration AI of the security configuration and operation of the networks that we have, because the human is usually the weakest link in the game in the end, actually.
Yes, my mother clicks on every link that anyone sends her and has been had her email compromised. If you
They
get an
should
email,
be able.
not-
They should be able. There should be also technical
Yeah.
controls in place to prevent the damage.
yes, that would be great. Please work on that. Alex, you were in government during much of the Salt Typhoon compromise, without revealing any classified information at the sensitive but unclassified level. How bad is it? How bad does it remain? And what does it tell us about the nature of the evolving cyber threats and our ability to respond?
Look, you are all right to worry about compromises of our critical infrastructure and our telecommunications infrastructure for intelligence gathering, compromising, etc. I will say, though, that in this age of kind of open source information being available, and then having the ability to farm that data for insights, that I'm also just worried about overall open source intelligence gathering and the picture that China is able to pull together. And when I say open source, I mean, I don't necessarily mean something you just Google, but because China has, vast reach into, let's just take an example, onshore, offshore cranes, or the Logink software that runs a number of ports around the world, which they essentially give out for free. They are able to pull data about flows of freight, which gives them insight into global trade flows, economic health, movement of military goods through ports, which the U.S. military and many other militaries rely on commercial movement of freight. From that, China's reach and its data processing, big data, AI capabilities, it can gather insights that are very deep, if they are actually doing this, very exquisite, which then enables them to make policy decisions, military decisions, an awareness from an intelligence perspective that is something that even 10 years ago was not really fathomable. So yes, we should be worried about compromises and China and other threat actors preparing the battlefield by compromising our infrastructure. But their overall economic reach and the ability to farm open source data is something we should worry about as well.
And what should we do about that?
Well, this goes back to something you were talking about before, which is we need trusted competitors. We need innovation, but we also need policy that makes this economical when we are pushing back against a nation that uses subsidy in a weaponized form. So how can we have the right policies among allies to create market situations that makes it economical for companies to enter these spaces, whether that's onshore, offshore cranes, whether that's freight management software? I mean, we can name a number of sectors where if you're competing for something that's essentially free, that you're not going to do that. So it's not easy, but we have to do it together.
Got it. Well, that's a perfect segue for you, Roberto, because from what I understand, Italy has recently elevated cyber policy to a national priority and has taken a proactive approach to government cybersecurity architecture. Can you tell us about that and tell us your reaction to what you've just heard about both the secret and open source threats?
Okay, I would like to start saying something about how to make our system more resilient, okay? Because as been said, a lot of things, absolutely correct. I think that we have to go in three directions. First of all, we have to create this trusted supply chain that reduce the possibility for the attacker to get into critical information. At the same time, we have to let's say, increase our cooperation from the point of view of attack that can be at institution, at critical infrastructure. And of course, we did a lot of work in the past at the EU level, at the international level. I was one of the guys that launched the counter-ransomware initiative that has been a huge success with more than 60 countries now, I think, that are in that forum. So we need interaction among the CSIRT of different countries, but we have already this at the European level. We have another network which is called Cyclone to fill the gap between the let's say the technical information and the political information, because it's very important to provide to politicians, to our government, the right information and consistent information among different countries to take good decision about what we have to do in time of crisis. Then there is something else that we have to do, I think, which is the cognitive security. So we have to work on our fellows citizens, because we really, I mean, when you are the enemy is in front to each of us, in our computers, and we have to make these people more resilient. Otherwise, there is no, great security infrastructure that Ericsson can do if there is someone that, discloses its own data to some website or somewhere else. So it's very important that we also, teach to in some way to our employees, to policymakers, how don't be manipulated, and especially this is stuff now when we talk about AI, which is expected, of course, to become much more intelligent than us, and this will create, a big issue. So from the point of view of Italy, what we did, we started when I was deputy director, general director of the Italian intelligence, thanks to Prime Minister Conte and then Draghi. We were able to build what we call the national security perimeter for cyber, where we put all the the technological critical assets of our country. So now we know, we are able to list which are, the products, the things, the vulnerability that they have, and everything. And so we are able to provide very good help to the companies. When we receive information or when we see something that is going wrong in our country. We also build, now it's very close, a project that I launched, which is the HyperSOC, which put together the SOCs of the most relevant Italian, what we call industrial Italian champions, together with the CSIRT of Italy, that is in the National Cybersecurity Agency that I was so lucky to create, and with that we have so many information to provide to our industries, which means that if you share information, as it has been said, your system will become more resilient. Having said that, I cannot, of course, exclude that something bad will happen in Italy, but the let's say the policy, the law that we did, the framework that we created, I think is strong and well done.
Excellent. Thank you. We've talked a lot about AI. We've talked a lot about 5G. We haven't talked about 6G. Let me start with you, Mikko. 6G.
Underway.
Well, seems like a whole new playing field, both for attackers and defenders. What are the new vulnerabilities? And what do we need to do as a country, as a team of allies, as a group of industries to stay ahead of those vulnerabilities? I would imagine that we should probably start doing it right now if we're not doing it already. you're the man to tell us.
Yeah, well, I think that we need to first recognize actually the pretty robust security for that is built in already, decades ago or the experience that we built together in telecommunications industry. 4G already had an encryption that is basically unbreakable in any modern means. 5G improved the security by having the subscriber security and privacy improved on protocol level, on the standard level. And 6G now, when my colleagues are there leading the standardization of 6G, security is really cornerstone. It's really one of the base rocks of the whole standard. So security is really key parameter, key ingredient of the whole standard. I think what we're going to see, and when 6G is going to build out, it's going to have AI integrated in every layer of the stack, from very near hardware on the radios to the core networks, every level until the service and app level. Obviously, we will also have AI-powered controls for security there. But we are driving zero trust architecture from Ericsson point of view, and only if, as an industry and a society, we are able to take the benefit of zero trust architecture with 5G and 6G, we're going to have good time with the future networks.
Well, we're all counting on that to happen. So I appreciate your efforts in that regard. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your service. And please give our panelists a round of applause. Thank you so much for being with us.